In 2013, on a quiet suburban street in Maplewood Heights, 7-year-old Ethan Harper vanished like smoke. Frantic searches yielded nothing, leaving a town haunted by unanswered questions. Then, in 2024, a routine Google Maps update revealed a chilling possibility. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Harpers' driveway in Maplewood Heights. 7-year-old Ethan, a whirlwind of boundless energy, pedaled his bright red bicycle back and forth. His laughter echoed in the quiet suburban street, a sound that would soon become a painful memory. His mother, Sarah Harper, stood on the porch, a gentle smile gracing her lips as she watched her son. "Ethan, time for dinner," she called out, her voice warm and inviting. The little boy, engrossed in his play, didn't immediately respond, his focus solely on the spinning wheels and the imaginary adventures they carried him on. Sarah called again, a little louder this time, a hint of playful impatience in her tone. Still, Ethan didn't appear, his small figure remaining just out of sight behind the family minivan. A familiar tug of a mother's instinct, a fleeting unease, flickered within her. She stepped off the porch, intending to gently usher him inside, the aroma of her cooking already filling the air. But as she rounded the minivan, the driveway was empty. The red bicycle lay on its side, its front wheel still slowly turning, a silent testament to a game abruptly interrupted. Panic tightened its icy grip around Sarah's chest. "Ethan," she called out, her voice now laced with a growing tremor. The only response was the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of neighborhood life, sounds that suddenly seemed menacing in their indifference. She scanned the yard, her eyes darting towards the overgrown bushes that lined the property, the small shed where Ethan sometimes hid during games of tag. Nothing. Her breath hitched in her throat, a cold dread washing over her as the realization began to dawn. Her son was gone. The initial frantic search involved the immediate neighbors, their voices joining Sarah's desperate calls, their footsteps pounding across lawns and peering into every conceivable hiding spot. The close-knit community of Maplewood Heights, usually a haven of tranquility, was instantly transformed into a scene of frantic urgency. Doors slammed open, flashlights flickered in the fading light, and the air crackled with fear. As minutes stretched into an agonizing hour, the local police were alerted. Sirens wailed in the distance, their approaching sound a stark punctuation mark on the unfolding nightmare. Uniformed officers swarmed the Harper residence, their calm professionalism a thin veil over the growing concern in their eyes. The investigation began immediately, a whirlwind of questions, meticulous searches of the property, and the establishment of a perimeter that felt both necessary and suffocating. Robert Harper, Ethan's father, arrived home from work to a scene of unimaginable chaos. The sight of police cars lining their quiet street, the hushed whispers of neighbors, and the raw terror etched on his wife's face shattered his ordinary world. He joined the search, his calls for Ethan raw with a father's desperate love and mounting fear. The first night was a blur of fruitless searching. Volunteers from the community joined the police, their numbers swelling as the news of Ethan's disappearance spread. They combed through nearby parks, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their voices hoarse from calling his name. Every shadow seemed to hold a potential answer. Every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of false hope. But morning dawned with the devastating reality that Ethan was still missing, leaving behind a void that echoed through the small town. The following days saw an intensification of the search efforts. Missing person flyers, bearing Ethan's smiling face, were plastered on every lamppost and storefront. The local news stations broadcast his story, his innocent image tugging at the heartstrings of the entire state. A dedicated hotline was established, its phone lines manned around the clock, fielding every tip, no matter how seemingly insignificant. Yet days turned into weeks, and weeks bled into months, with each passing moment dimming the flickering flame of hope. The initial outpouring of community support slowly began to wane under the crushing weight of unanswered questions, leaving the Harper family in a perpetual state of agonizing uncertainty. Eleanor Vance, a young, ambitious journalist for the local Maplewood Heights Gazette, was assigned to cover the story. It was one of her first major assignments, and the image of Ethan's missing child poster, with his bright, trusting eyes, became seared into her memory. She followed every lead, interviewed the distraught parents countless times, and spent hours poring over police reports, searching for any overlooked detail that might offer a clue. The case became an obsession, a silent weight she carried with her long after the headlines faded. Even after years passed and the Ethan Harper story grew cold, Eleanor kept a small plastic toy compass, a gift Ethan had received just before he disappeared, clipped to her keychain, a constant reminder of the little boy the town had lost and the story that remained unfinished. The unsolved mystery haunted her, a persistent whisper in the back of her mind, a promise she unknowingly made to a child she never truly knew. The vibrant posters featuring Ethan's youthful grin gradually faded under the relentless assault of sun and rain, their edges curling and their colors leaching away. They remained tacked to notice boards and shop windows, silent sentinels of a tragedy that time seemed determined to erase, yet the community refused to entirely forget. The dedicated hotline, once buzzing with activity, fell silent, the hopes of a quick resolution replaced by the heavy resignation of a case gone cold. Leads dwindled to nothing, each potential breakthrough dissolving into another dead end, leaving investigators frustrated and the Harper family heartbroken. Eleanor Vance, now a seasoned investigative journalist at a larger metropolitan newspaper, still revisited the old case files from time to time. The memory of Sarah and Robert Harper's tear-streaked faces remained vivid, a stark reminder of the human cost of unsolved disappearances. She had covered numerous other stories over the intervening years, political scandals, local crimes, human interest pieces, but the Ethan Harper case lingered, an open file in the back of her mind, a professional and personal failure that gnawed at her. The small toy compass on her keychain, worn smooth from years of absent-minded fiddling, served as a tangible link to that earlier time, a constant nudge to not let the story be forgotten. Maplewood Heights itself carried the quiet scars of Ethan's disappearance. The once carefree atmosphere of the suburban streets was subtly altered, a lingering undercurrent of sadness and unease permeating the community. Parents held their children a little tighter, their eyes scanning playgrounds and sidewalks with an added layer of vigilance. The annual town picnic, once a joyous celebration, carried a somber undertone, a silent acknowledgement of the missing child who should have been there, laughing and playing with his friends. Sarah and Robert Harper retreated into a quiet grief, the relentless media attention eventually fading, replaced by the isolating silence of their loss. They never moved from their Maplewood Heights home, clinging to the familiar surroundings that held both cherished memories and the constant, aching reminder of their missing son. They continued to hope, however faintly, for any news, any sign that might offer a sliver of understanding, a reason for the silence that had enveloped their lives. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went, each milestone a painful reminder of Ethan's absence, an empty chair at the table, a missing voice in their family traditions. The police investigation, while officially still open, had long since run out of active leads. The detectives who had initially worked the case moved on to other assignments, their initial urgency replaced by the cold reality of limited resources and the frustrating lack of evidence. The file remained in the archives, a thick binder filled with unanswered questions, witness statements that led nowhere, and the poignant photographs of a smiling 7-year-old boy. From time to time, a new detective would briefly review the case, searching for any detail that might have been overlooked, but the years of silence had created a seemingly insurmountable barrier. Tips still trickled in occasionally, fueled by anniversary news reports or the sympathetic recollections of longtime residents. Each call, each email brought a fleeting surge of hope to the Harper family and the few remaining investigators still loosely connected to the case. But these whispers of potential leads invariably dissolved into nothing. A misidentification, a second-hand recollection, a flight of fancy fueled by empathy rather than fact. The digital age, with its promise of instant information, offered no solace, no trace of Ethan in the vast expanse of the internet. His disappearance remained a stark reminder of the limitations of technology when confronted with the enigma of a missing child. Eleanor, despite her professional distance, felt the weight of each failed lead. She maintained occasional quiet contact with the Harpers, offering a listening ear and a gentle reminder that Ethan had not been forgotten. She knew that with each passing year, the chances of finding him diminished, but a small part of her, the cub reporter who had first covered the story, refused to let go entirely. The compass on her keychain, a cheap plastic trinket, felt heavier with each anniversary of Ethan's disappearance, a constant silent accusation of a mystery unsolved. She often wondered what kind of young man Ethan would be now, what dreams he would be pursuing, what milestones he would be celebrating. The silence surrounding his fate was a suffocating blanket, stifling any sense of closure for his family and the community that had mourned his loss. The years stretched on, each one adding another layer of dust to the cold case file, another pang of unanswered grief in the hearts of those who remembered the little boy who vanished from a quiet suburban street. 11 years had passed since Ethan Harper disappeared from his front yard. The leaves had turned countless times. Children who were toddlers then were now teenagers, and the world had continued its relentless march forward. For Eleanor Vance, the Ethan Harper case had become a deeply buried ache, a story she occasionally revisited in the quiet solitude of her office. The faded photographs a stark reminder of a life interrupted. One otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon in late 2024, while researching an unrelated story, Eleanor found herself idly scrolling through Google Maps, a familiar procrastination technique. She typed in Maplewood Heights, the name automatically triggering a cascade of memories, the faces of Sarah and Robert Harper flashing through her mind. She zoomed in on the familiar streets, the virtual landscape, a slightly updated version of the town she had known as a young reporter. Out of habit, she clicked on a street view icon, dropping the little yellow figure onto a road she vaguely recognized. A rural route on the outskirts of Maplewood Heights, an area that hadn't been part of the initial search perimeter. The view flickered, the algorithm smoothly stitching together the latest panoramic images. Eleanor wasn't looking for anything in particular, her mind still preoccupied with her current assignment. But then her eyes snagged on something that made her breath catch in her throat. Parked haphazardly on the shoulder of a narrow unpaved lane leading away from the main road was a vehicle, an older model pickup truck. Its paint faded and peeling. It was easy to miss, blending into the overgrown verge. But beyond the truck, near the entrance to what appeared to be an abandoned farmhouse, stood a solitary figure. The image was grainy, slightly blurred by the limitations of the Google Street View technology and the distance. The figure was facing away from the camera, its posture slightly hunched, its clothing indistinct. It could have been anyone, a local resident, a trespasser, someone simply passing through. But something about the figure's size, its proportions, triggered a deep, visceral reaction in Eleanor. It wasn't an adult. It was too small, too slight. A child, perhaps. But what would a child be doing alone so far from the main road at what looked like a derelict property? Eleanor's heart began to pound in her chest, a sudden, irrational surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She zoomed in on the image as much as the resolution would allow, the pixels blurring, the figure becoming even more indistinct. Yet the unsettling feeling persisted, a nagging intuition that this fleeting, grainy image held a significance she couldn't yet explain. She instinctively checked the date of the Street View capture, a small, often overlooked detail displayed at the bottom of the screen. The images were recent, part of the latest Google Maps refresh, dated just a few weeks prior. This wasn't an old image, a ghost from the past. This was something new, something current. Eleanor's mind raced, the years of cold leads and dead ends momentarily forgotten. Could this be it? Could this grainy, anonymous figure be the key to unlocking the mystery of Ethan Harper's disappearance? The abandoned farmhouse itself was vaguely familiar. She remembered seeing it mentioned in some of the early police reports, a dilapidated property on the fringes of the search area, dismissed at the time as unlikely to be connected to Ethan's vanishing. It was too far from his home, too isolated. But 11 years was a long time. A child who had been abducted might have been moved, hidden away, and the timeline fit. If the image was indeed recent, the person in it, if it were Ethan, would be 17 or 18 years old now, their childhood features likely altered by the passage of time. Yet, there was something in the set of the shoulders, the way the figure stood, that resonated with the image of the small boy from the missing person posters Eleanor had studied so intently years ago. It was a long shot, a tenuous connection based on a blurry photograph and a journalist's hunch. But Eleanor Vance had learned to trust her instincts. She meticulously took a screenshot of the Google Maps image, saving the date and the precise location coordinates. The little toy compass on her keychain felt suddenly cold against her fingers. The silence of 11 years might finally be broken. Eleanor stared at the grainy screenshot on her computer screen. The blurry figure by the abandoned farmhouse road a haunting enigma. The initial surge of adrenaline had settled into a focused determination. She knew that a low-resolution Google Maps image was far from conclusive proof, but her gut told her this was something worth pursuing. Her years as an investigative journalist had honed her research skills, and she immediately began to dissect the available information. The first crucial step was to verify the accuracy of the timestamp and geolocation data associated with the Street View image. She cross-referenced the Google Maps data with other publicly available mapping services and satellite imagery, looking for any discrepancies or inconsistencies. The coordinates pinpointed the location precisely, a stretch of unpaved road leading to a long-abandoned property just outside the original search perimeter for Ethan Harper. The date of the image capture was consistently shown as early October 2024. Next, Eleanor delved into the history of the property. County records revealed that the farmhouse had been vacant for over 15 years, its last known owner having moved out of state. There were no recent records of sale or occupancy. This corroborated the dilapidated appearance of the buildings in the Street View image. The isolation of the property struck Eleanor. It was far enough from any main roads to be easily overlooked, yet accessible via a network of older, less traveled routes. This isolation could have made it an ideal, albeit grim, location to conceal someone for an extended period. Eleanor then focused on the unpaved lane where the figure was standing. The Street View image showed it branching off the main rural road, partially obscured by overgrown vegetation. This detail sparked a crucial question: how often was this lane likely to be traveled? It didn't appear to lead to any other residences or businesses. This suggested that any activity in this area would be less likely to be observed or reported. Eleanor decided to analyze historical aerial imagery of the area, hoping to identify any changes in the landscape or the access to the farmhouse over the past 11 years. She accessed archived satellite photos, painstakingly comparing images from 2013 to the present day. The older images confirmed the farmhouse was already abandoned at the time of Ethan's disappearance. However, the satellite views also revealed something significant: a faint, overgrown track leading further into the woods behind the farmhouse, a track not visible from the main road and not captured in the Google Street View. This hidden access lane could have provided a more discreet way to reach the property without being seen from the main road. Eleanor considered the limitations of the Street View image. The blurriness made positive identification of the figure impossible. It offered no clues about age, gender, or any distinguishing features. However, the fact that someone was there at all, at such a remote and abandoned location so recently, felt significant. It defied any logical explanation of casual passers-by. Her journalistic instincts screamed that this was more than just a random occurrence. She began to think about who might have a connection to this abandoned property. She revisited the original police reports on Ethan's disappearance, meticulously searching for any mention of individuals who lived in or had ties to the outskirts of Maplewood Heights, particularly those with any history of suspicious behavior or who had been ruled out as suspects. Many names were familiar from her earlier reporting, but one name in particular caught her eye: Arthur Jenkins. Jenkins was a recluse who had lived on a small, isolated property a few miles from the Harpers' residence back in 2013. He had been briefly questioned by police, but was quickly dismissed as a suspect due to a lack of any concrete evidence linking him to Ethan. However, Eleanor remembered a detail from one of the old reports. Jenkins' property bordered a large tract of undeveloped land that, according to older maps, might connect to the area behind the abandoned farmhouse. It was a tenuous link, a threadbare possibility, but it was the most concrete lead she had. Eleanor decided to delve deeper into Arthur Jenkins' background. She searched online databases, looking for any updated information about him. She found a record indicating that he had been evicted from his original property several years after Ethan's disappearance, and his current whereabouts were unknown. This dead end initially felt discouraging, but then Eleanor had another idea. She remembered that property tax records were often publicly accessible. She searched the county database for records related to the abandoned farmhouse. The owner listed was an elderly woman who had long since moved out of state, but the mailing address associated with the property tax bills was a post office box in the same town where Arthur Jenkins had last been known to reside before his eviction. It was a subtle connection, but it strengthened Eleanor's suspicion. Could Jenkins have been using the abandoned farmhouse, perhaps even as a clandestine hideout? The pieces of the puzzle were slowly, tentatively, beginning to fit together. The grainy figure in the Google Street View, the hidden access lane, the connection to Arthur Jenkins, it all pointed to the abandoned farmhouse as a location that warranted a closer in-person investigation. Eleanor knew she had to go to Maplewood Heights. The toy compass on her keychain felt heavy with a renewed sense of purpose. The late autumn air in Maplewood Heights was crisp and carried the scent of decaying leaves. As Eleanor drove along the familiar rural roads, the landscape had changed subtly over the past 11 years, but the underlying quietness of the area remained. She located the main road visible in the Google Street View and carefully scanned the roadside for the unpaved lane. It was even more overgrown than it had appeared in the image, barely discernible as a track leading away from the paved surface. Eleanor parked her car discreetly down the road out of sight and began to walk towards the hidden lane. The crunch of fallen leaves under her boots was the only sound breaking the stillness. As she turned onto the unpaved track, the abandoned farmhouse came into view through the skeletal branches of bare trees. It looked even more dilapidated in person. Windows were broken, the roof sagged in places, and the wooden siding was weathered and grey. A sense of foreboding settled over Eleanor as she approached the property. Following the faint impression of the hidden access lane she had identified in the satellite imagery, Eleanor cautiously made her way around the back of the farmhouse. The undergrowth was thick and tangled, and the air hung heavy with the musty smell of decay. As she pushed through a dense patch of overgrown bushes, she stumbled upon something that made her freeze. It was a patch of disturbed earth, an area where the natural ground cover was noticeably different. The soil looked looser, darker, and there were fewer weeds growing here compared to the surrounding undisturbed ground. The shape was vaguely rectangular, and Eleanor's heart began to pound with a terrifying realization. It looked like a shallow, overgrown trench. Kneeling down, she carefully brushed away some of the loose leaves and debris. Beneath them, she saw the faint outline of what appeared to be disturbed soil, a subtle depression in the earth. A wave of nausea washed over her as the horrifying implication became clear. This could be an unmarked grave. Fighting back a surge of panic, Eleanor took a series of photographs of the area from different angles, documenting its exact location and appearance. She then carefully examined the surrounding ground, her eyes scanning for any other signs, footprints, discarded objects, anything that might offer further clues. Near the edge of the disturbed earth, partially hidden beneath a layer of leaves, she spotted something small and plastic. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. It was a child's toy, a small, brightly colored plastic dinosaur, its paint chipped and faded. A wave of grief and a chilling certainty washed over Eleanor. It looked like the kind of toy a 7-year-old boy might have owned. The realization hit her with brutal force. She might have found Ethan Harper's final resting place. Knowing she needed to proceed carefully and involve law enforcement, Eleanor backed away from the area, taking care not to disturb any potential evidence. She pulled out her phone, her hand shaking as she dialed the local police department in Maplewood Heights. She identified herself and explained that she was an investigative journalist working on the cold case of Ethan Harper's disappearance. She described her discovery of the disturbed ground and the toy dinosaur near an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town, providing the exact location details. The dispatcher's initial skepticism quickly turned to serious attention as Eleanor outlined her reasoning and the connection to the long unsolved case. She emphasized the need for a thorough forensic investigation of the site. Within the hour, the abandoned farmhouse was swarming with law enforcement personnel. Marked police cruisers blocked the main road, and yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the property. Eleanor stood a short distance away, watching as investigators carefully documented the disturbed earth and the surrounding area. Forensic technicians began the painstaking process of excavating the site. The atmosphere was thick with tension and a heavy sense of anticipation. As the afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape, the excavators unearthed skeletal remains. A collective gasp went through the assembled investigators. The silence that followed was broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of police radios. Eleanor felt a profound sadness, but also a grim sense of closure. After 11 long years, it seemed they had finally found Ethan Harper. The toy compass on her keychain felt cold, a silent tribute to the little boy whose fate had remained hidden for so long. The digital breadcrumbs on a map had finally led to a heartbreaking yet definitive answer. The skeletal remains discovered at the abandoned farmhouse were carefully transported to the county medical examiner's office for forensic analysis. Days later, the DNA results confirmed what Eleanor, and deep down perhaps even the Harper family, had tragically suspected: the remains were those of Ethan Harper. The discovery sent shockwaves through Maplewood Heights, reopening old wounds and bringing a somber resolution to a mystery that had haunted the town for over a decade. The focus of the investigation immediately shifted from a missing person case to a homicide inquiry. Investigators now had a location and human remains, providing crucial new avenues for investigation after years of dead ends. Armed with the DNA confirmation and Eleanor's initial findings, the police turned their attention to Arthur Jenkins, the recluse who had previously lived near the Harper residence and had a potential connection to the abandoned farmhouse through property tax records. A nationwide search was launched, and within a week, Jenkins was located in a neighboring state, living a quiet, isolated life under an assumed name. He was apprehended and brought back to Maplewood Heights for questioning. Initially, Jenkins denied any involvement in Ethan's disappearance. However, confronted with the forensic evidence from the burial site, including traces of soil and fibers that matched items found in his former property, and the timeline aligning with his sudden departure from Maplewood Heights shortly after Ethan vanished, his carefully constructed denials began to crumble. After several intense hours of interrogation, Arthur Jenkins confessed to the abduction and murder of Ethan Harper. He revealed a disturbing sequence of events from that fateful afternoon in 2013. He claimed he had been driving through Maplewood Heights when he saw Ethan playing in his yard. He stated he had an impulse, a dark and inexplicable urge to take the boy. He lured Ethan away from his driveway with a fabricated story, drove him to the abandoned farmhouse, a place he had known about for years, and then, for reasons he struggled to articulate, he had killed the child and buried him in the shallow grave. His confession brought a chilling clarity to the years of unanswered questions, a devastating explanation for Ethan's sudden and inexplicable disappearance. The news of Jenkins' confession and the recovery of Ethan's remains brought a mixture of grief and relief to Sarah and Robert Harper. While nothing could ever truly compensate for the loss of their son, they finally had answers, a resolution to the agonizing uncertainty that had defined their lives for 11 years. They expressed their gratitude to law enforcement, and in a quiet statement released through a family spokesperson, acknowledged the unexpected role that technology, in the form of a Google Maps image, had played in finally bringing their son home. Eleanor Vance watched the news unfold with a profound sense of closure. The little toy compass on her keychain, a constant reminder of her early journalistic failure, now felt like a symbol of perseverance and the unexpected ways in which truth can be revealed. She reflected on the power of digital footprints, the vast amounts of data we unknowingly leave behind, and how, in this case, a seemingly routine update to a mapping service had inadvertently captured a crucial piece of a long-dormant puzzle. The story of Ethan Harper served as a stark reminder of the enduring impact of unsolved crimes and the relentless pursuit of justice, even after years of silence. Technology, in its pervasive and often unnoticed way, had finally spoken, bringing a measure of peace to a grieving family and closing a chapter that had haunted a community for over a decade.